Hi, I'm Sally Wetherill, and I'm going to be wrapping up Chapter 7 today by talking about exempt performances and the public display right. So, exempt performances. We're going to start off here. Some digital audio transmissions of sound recordings are exempt from the digital public performance right, and licenses are not required for these types of transmissions. The main type of exempt transmission is called the non-subscription broadcast transmission. The non-subscription broadcast transmissions are broadcasts of terrestrial radio stations that are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission that also broadcast over the internet. So for example, when you're listening to your favorite terrestrial radio station through your computer, that is considered a non-subscription broadcast transmission. So the DPRSRA, also known as the Digital Performance Right in Sound Recordings Act, initially made retransmissions of radio broadcasts exempt. However, the Copyright Office issued a regulation stating that transmissions of an AM or FM broadcast signal over a digital communications network are subject to the sound recording copyright owner's digital public performance right. So now on to performances subject to compulsory licenses. Some subscription transmissions are subject to a compulsory license because they are deemed as not likely to displace record sales. Displacing record sales and record sales in general are a big factor in when it comes to performances subject to compulsory licenses. Examples of subscription transmissions are satellite and cable companies, webcasters, and companies that transmit music to specially equipped automobiles, cell phones, and other devices. To be subject to the compulsory license, a subscription transmission must satisfy these requirements right here, all of them. There's information about each requirement in the book, but I have them listed right here for you to see. So you may ask, how are compulsory licenses obtained? Well, if you qualify for the compulsory license, you must file a notice of intent to obtain a license with the Copyright Office. This notice should specify your full legal name, address, phone number, fax number, and the date of first transmission. It must also be accompanied by a filing fee. You can make ephemeral copies of sound recordings that can only be used for internet transmissions by means of streaming technology and must be destroyed within 6 months unless preserved solely for archival purposes. What will the compulsory royalty rate be? So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act actually provided that rates should be negotiated by the parties, but ultimately, if there is no agreement, a copyright arbitration royalty panel, also known as CARP, under the Library of Congress will determine these rates. So who gets the money? A nonprofit organization called Sound Exchange actually issues licenses and collects the license fees for digital performances of sound recordings. Sound Exchange also deducts its administrative expenses and pays the remaining amount to sound recording copyright owners and recording artists. And as you can see on this slide, there are percentages that portray the money that gets split up between copyright owners, recording artists, musicians, and vocalists. So much like the performances subject to compulsory license, performances subject to negotiated license have a high likelihood of displacing record sales. This is why such transmissions must be made by negotiating licenses with the copyright owners. Some types of transmissions for which licenses must be negotiated are interactive transmissions and subscription transmissions, like you can see right there. So in Section 115D of the Copyright Act, the DPRSRA defines a digital phonorecord delivery as this quote right here, which is on page 129 of Chapter 7. The distinction between a DPD or download and a public performance of a musical composition is that the licensing of a DPDs differ from the licensing set forth in Section 114 of the Copyright Act. So Section 106.5 of the copyright defines the public display right, and the public display right gives copyright owners the exclusive right to display and to authorize others to display their copyrighted works publicly. limited to the display of copyrighted works in copies and not phonorecords. And this is not applicable to sound recordings. On page 130, to display a work means to show a copy of it either directly or by means of a film, slide, television image, or any other device or process, or in the case of a motion picture or other audiovisual work, to show individual images non-sequentially. Now we will be discussing display of a single image at a single site. Section 109C of the Copyright Act allows the owner of a copy to display the copy publicly. However, the copy must have been lawfully made, and the display must be either a direct display or a display by the projection of no more than one image at a time. So this is the final slide to my presentation, wrapping up Chapter 7, display in situations where performance is exempted. So there are actually several exemptions that apply to the public performance right that connect to the display right because they apply to the display right as well. And also in Section 110, exempts displays for purpose of face-to-face teaching activities, instructional transmission, and religious services.